Two massive armies stand on a battlefield. Over 4 million warriors stretched across a plain called Kurukshetra, ready to destroy each other. Brothers against brothers, teachers against students, uncles against nephews. The greatest war in Hindu mythology is about to begin, and at the center of it all, one man drops his weapons and refuses to fight. His name is Arjuna. He's the greatest archer alive. He spent his entire life preparing for this moment. And now, with both armies staring at him, he looks across the field and sees his own grandfather in the enemy ranks, his beloved teacher, his cousins, the men who raised him. And he breaks. He tells his charioteer, "I can't do this. I won't kill my own family. I'd rather die than live with that blood on my hands. Let them kill me. I don't care. I'm done." But his charioteer is not an ordinary man. His charioteer is Krishna, God in human form. And what Krishna says next becomes the most important conversation in the history of Hinduism. A conversation about duty, death, the nature of the soul, the meaning of action, and the question every human being eventually has to face. When everything you love is on the line, what is the right thing to do? That conversation is the Bhagavad Gita. And for over 2,000 years, it has shaped more lives than almost any text in human history. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what the Gita says, why it was spoken on a battlefield, and why its ideas still hit harder today than most modern philosophy ever will. But there's one teaching in this text, one single idea, that challenges everything the Western world believes about how to live a good life. We'll get there. But first, you need to understand the war. If you're new here, subscribe to Atlas of Religion. We break down every world religion with this level of depth, and this channel is just getting started. The Bhagavad Gita is not a standalone book. It's a section, 700 verses long, embedded inside the Mahabharata, the longest epic poem in human history. The Mahabharata tells the story of a family torn apart by a dispute over a kingdom. On one side, the Pandavas, 5 brothers led by the eldest, Yudhishthira, the righteous, and backed by Arjuna, the warrior. On the other side, the Kauravas, 100 brothers led by the jealous and power-hungry Duryodhana. The conflict between them had been building for decades. Deception, betrayal, exile, attempted assassination, a rigged dice game that stripped the Pandavas of their kingdom and humiliated their shared wife Draupadi in front of the entire court. Every attempt at peace failed. Every negotiation was sabotaged. And eventually, after 13 years in exile, the Pandavas returned to claim what was theirs, and Duryodhana refused to give back even 5 villages. War became inevitable, and not a small war. Every kingdom in ancient India chose a side. Warriors, chariots, elephants, and foot soldiers gathered on the plain of Kurukshetra in numbers the world had never seen. The Gita opens at the exact moment before the first arrow flies. Arjuna asks Krishna to drive his chariot between the two armies so he can see who he's about to fight. And when he looks, really looks, at the faces on the other side, his courage collapses. He sees Bhishma, the patriarch who held him as a baby. He sees Drona, the teacher who put the first bow in his hands. He sees cousins he grew up with, men he loved. And Arjuna says, "What good is a kingdom won by killing your own people? What good is victory if everyone you care about is dead? I'd rather beg in the streets than sit on a throne soaked in family blood." This is not cowardice. This is a man staring into the moral abyss of war and refusing to pretend it's clean. And this is exactly the crisis Krishna has been waiting for, because Arjuna's despair is the doorway to the deepest teaching in Hinduism. Krishna's response unfolds over 18 chapters. It covers the nature of reality, the structure of the self, the mechanics of action, the paths to liberation, and the relationship between the human soul and the divine. It's dense, it's layered, but the core teachings can be understood through 4 fundamental ideas that build on each other like steps. The first teaching is the immortality of the soul. Krishna's opening move is to dismantle Arjuna's entire reason for grief. You're mourning for people who cannot actually die, Krishna tells him. The soul, the Atman, is eternal. It was never born. It will never cease to exist. It cannot be cut by weapons. It cannot be burned by fire. It cannot be drowned by water or dried by wind. The body dies. The soul does not. Krishna compares the soul's journey through bodies to a person changing clothes. When a shirt wears out, you take it off and put on a new one. You don't mourn the shirt. The body is the shirt. The soul is the one wearing it. Death is not an ending. It's a change of outfit. This isn't metaphor for Krishna. This is the literal structure of reality. And if the soul cannot die, then Arjuna's grief is based on an illusion. He's weeping for bodies, temporary forms, while the eternal essence inside those bodies remains untouched. But Arjuna isn't stupid. He pushes back. Even if the soul is eternal, the pain of killing is real. The relationships are real. The grief is real. Knowing the soul survives doesn't make plunging an arrow into your grandfather's chest feel any better. Which brings Krishna to the second teaching, dharma. Dharma is one of the most important and most untranslatable concepts in Hinduism. It means duty, cosmic law, righteousness, the moral order of the universe, all at once. Every person has a dharma, a role, a function in the larger system. And Arjuna's dharma is the dharma of a warrior. Krishna tells Arjuna, "You were born for this. Your entire life has been preparation for this moment." Walking away is not humility. Walking away is not compassion. Walking away is a warrior abandoning his post because the fight got personal. And when a warrior abandons dharma, the entire moral order begins to collapse. Not just for him, for everyone. This is where the Gita makes a move that most Western philosophy refuses to make. It says that sometimes your duty requires you to do something that causes pain. Sometimes the right thing and the comfortable thing are not the same thing. And choosing comfort over duty, even when your motives feel noble, is still a failure. But Arjuna's real problem isn't fear, it's attachment. He's attached to outcomes. He's paralyzed because he's calculating the results of his actions, the death, the grief, the guilt. And those imagined results have frozen him. He can't act because he can't stop thinking about what his actions will cost. Which leads to the third teaching. And this is the one that changes everything. Nishkama karma, desireless action. If this is desireless, making you rethink how you approach your own life, hit subscribe and like this video. Because Atlas of Religion goes deeper than any other channel on the ideas that shaped humanity. Krishna tells Arjuna, "You have the right to action, but never to the fruits of action. Do not let the results of action be your motive, and do not cling to inaction." This single verse, chapter 2, verse 47, is arguably the most quoted line in all of Hindu scripture. And it's the idea that directly contradicts how the modern Western world teaches you to live. The West says, set goals, visualize outcomes, work for results, measure your success by what you achieve. The Gita says the opposite. Act, but let go of the outcome. Do your duty with full effort and zero attachment to whether it succeeds or fails, whether you're praised or blamed, whether you win or lose. Why? Because attachment to outcomes is the engine of suffering. When you act for results, your happiness depends on something you cannot control. The world doesn't owe you the outcome you want, and when the outcome doesn't arrive, or arrives in a form you didn't expect, you suffer. Not because of what happened, but because of the gap between what happened and what you wanted to happen. Krishna is telling Arjuna, fight, but don't fight for victory. Fight because fighting is your dharma. Surrender the outcome to the divine. Do what's right because it's right, not because of what you'll get from it. And in that surrender, you become free. free from anxiety, free from the paralysis of calculation, free from the tyranny of results. This is not passivity. Krishna is not saying, don't care. He's saying, care about the action, not about what the action gets you. Pour everything into the work. Pour nothing into the expectation. This teaching alone has influenced leaders, philosophers, and movements for over 2 millennia. Mahatma Gandhi called the Gita his spiritual dictionary. He built the entire Indian independence movement around the principle of acting with full conviction and zero attachment to personal gain. Robert Oppenheimer quoted the Gita after the first atomic bomb detonated. Aldous Huxley called it the most comprehensive statement of the perennial philosophy ever written. And it all comes from a God telling a warrior to stop crying and do his job. The fourth teaching is bhakti, devotion. Up to this point, Krishna has been speaking as a teacher, a wise friend sitting beside Arjuna in the chariot, calmly dismantling his excuses. But in chapter 11, everything changes. Arjuna asks Krishna to reveal his true form, and Krishna opens himself up. And what Arjuna sees is not a man. He sees the entire universe inside Krishna's body. Every god, every demon, every creature, every galaxy, every star being born and dying simultaneously. He sees the armies on both sides of the battlefield being swallowed into Krishna's mouths, consumed by time, already dead before the first arrow has been fired. He sees creation and destruction happening as one continuous act. He sees infinity. And Arjuna is terrified. He trembles. He begs Krishna to return to his familiar form. He cannot bear the vision. No human mind can. This moment is the emotional peak of the Gita, because it transforms the entire text from a philosophical dialogue into a revelation. Krishna is not just giving Arjuna advice. Krishna is showing Arjuna, and through him every reader across every century, that the divine is not some distant abstraction. The divine is right here, sitting in the chariot next to you, driving your horses, and it contains everything that ever was, is, or will be. And Krishna tells Arjuna, of all the paths to liberation, the simplest and most powerful is love. Devotion, surrender, not through knowledge alone, not through action alone, but through giving your entire heart to the divine and trusting that whatever happens is held by something infinitely larger than your ability to understand it. This is the Gita's final answer to Arjuna's crisis. You are not alone in this. You were never alone in this. The universe is not indifferent. God is sitting next to you, and God is asking you to trust, to act, to fulfill your dharma, and to surrender the rest. Arjuna picks up his bow. The war begins. Now, here's what the Gita does that almost no other religious text does. It doesn't offer Arjuna an easy answer. It doesn't say the war is good. It doesn't say killing is fine. It doesn't erase the tragedy. What it says is, life will put you in positions where every option carries a cost, where there is no clean choice. And in those moments, the only thing you can control is whether you act from duty or from desire, whether you face the hard thing or run from it, and whether you trust that your actions are part of something larger than your ability to see. That's why the Gita is set on a battlefield and not in a monastery, because the real, spiritual test doesn't happen when life is peaceful. It happens when life is impossible, when the people you love are on the other side of the field, when every path forward includes pain, when you want to drop your weapons and disappear. Krishna's message is, you don't get to disappear. You're here. This is your moment. Now act. 2,000 years later, that message hasn't aged a single day. If this video just shifted something in how you think about duty, purpose, or the nature of the divine, subscribe to Atlas of Religion. We break down every major religious text, every spiritual tradition, every idea that shaped civilization. And we're just getting started. Next, we're tackling the most controversial topic in all of Hinduism: the system that divided 1 billion people into ranks at birth and still shapes Indian society today. The caste system, where it actually came from, what the original texts really say, and why the truth is more complicated than any headline will ever tell you. That video is right here. I'll see you there.